Hey, everybody, this is Becky Drose, and thank you for listening to the Gorilla HR podcast. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that is really important, not just in our personal lives, but also in our workplaces, and that is mental health. I am excited today to have Jennifer Sims with us. She is actually one of the outreach coordinators for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. And so she's going to have some really good tips for us and things around mental health and what we can be doing and resources that are out there. So instead of me talking about her, let's just have her come on in. Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, how are you?
I am so good. I'm so glad you're here with us. So, I want to dive right into it. I was actually looking at some statistics and I saw that 1 in 4 adults in the US is going to have some sort of mental health episode every year. So, that is a lot of people. That's a lot of people with a lot of things going on. So, where do we go for resources? What do we do? How do we handle when this is the life that we're living right now?
Unfortunately, those statistics are just basically accurate. That's the world we live in. I always say growing up, we never discussed mental health. It wasn't
Mhm.
something that we sat down and talked about at the house. When you come in from school, and I'm not saying that we should, we do that now, but it just wasn't aware. I remember I
Yeah.
had a family member that went to the mental hospital often, and I never knew that until I was in my 30s or so that she was actually in a mental hospital. And so we just didn't talk about it. And now, especially since COVID, it has really ramped up to where it is on the forefront with everybody. Everybody's like, okay, this is real. What are we doing? And so while there are still some bumps in the road as far as people, for lack of better words, having their heads stuck in the sand and not wanting to acknowledge it, there are far more people that are willing to talk about it. And I think that gives us the opportunity to educate, which is one of the things that NAMI does. We actually are NAMI Piedmont Tri County, so we cover Lancaster, Chester, and York County here in South Carolina. However, NAMI is a national organization. So it has very much opened up a lot of avenues for us to go in and, since we are a nonprofit, be able to help. But the statistics are astounding, especially when you start getting into the younger generation. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so many things that you've said already, my mind is like racing. So I think the first piece of that, the whole idea of the stigma and that we don't talk about it. I grew up not talking about mental health either. And I grew up in a home with a healthcare worker. Like my mom was a nurse. And even having that medical background, it was still just something like you just didn't talk about. And so I think
Right.
it's really good that we do have that shift where now it's like okay to say like, oh yeah, I've been to therapy for that, I've worked through this, or and even for myself, so I admit I've gone to therapy off and on over the years, and the first time I went when I was in my 20s, I was scared to tell people, like I was embarrassed, like I thought something was wrong with me, and now I'm like, oh, I think you need therapy. Let me tell you how it's helped me.
Yeah. Yes. I
Now I'm
and
like,
I
let me give you some names.
Yes, and I 100% every presentation that I do, I always say I mean everybody's different. Everybody operates differently. Everybody gets affected by different things. But the thing that helps me and with my lived experience, my lifelines are therapy, caffeine, and Jesus. Those are my three. Like
Yeah.
I think the world would be such a much better place with therapy for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's just good to have somebody that you can go talk to that's not in your circle, that doesn't know your people, that
Yes.
can, you do not have to worry about it. And their job is literally to sit there and listen to you word vomit, if you will, sometimes,
Yes.
because sometimes that's what we need to do. So I am an advocate for therapy. I think whether you have a mental health situation or not, therapy is wonderful, wonderful.
Yes. For me, it's something where just as you said, having somebody who's outside of it to listen. And I feel like I know they're going to be on my side, but at the same time, I know they're going to call me on my own shit. Like they're going
Right.
to be like, they're going
Right.
to be like, okay, let's back up a second. And, like, and it's always the asking questions. Like I tease my sister-in-law is a mental health worker. And so, she'll do therapy. And so I always tease her, like, whenever she says something, I'm like, now, Christine, how does this make you feel now? Like, how can we handle this situation? Like,
Right.
what kind of tools could we use because we're mad right now? Whatever it is. And so even though like I don't I'm not trained in that, I don't know what I'm saying, but it's just kind of funny because I like to throw it back at her every once in a while.
Well, my therapist, I was introduced to therapy, when I went through, we went through my situation or whatever, and it was encouraged, you probably need to see somebody. Jennifer, whoa, whoa, whoa. You've been dealing with this for so long, and you've been paying attention to somebody else, and now it's time for you to pay attention to yourself, and you need to see somebody. And I always looked at it more selfish than anything else. I was always like, but that's putting the spotlight on me, and it's not me, but then once
Mhm.
I went to therapy, and I was like, well, maybe it is me just a little bit. Maybe I need to work through a few things. And now in my office here in Lancaster, my therapist office is right across the hall. I don't know how much she loves that, but I think it's great. I'm like, yes, so, but no, really, therapy is a huge tool that I think, again, whether you have a personal mental health situation or you have a family member that does, I just think it's phenomenal. It is
I do
absolutely phenomenal.
too. I do too. I especially think about just the context of like what mental health is. So, in my mind, and maybe when I was growing up, it was like these big things. It was like, oh, schizophrenia, or
Right.
maybe like a major bipolar disorder or something. Like like
Depression, yeah,
anything with your thinking and your feeling and your mood and how you relate to others on a daily process, like that's all part of mental health. So that
right.
doesn't have to be like at the crisis level to still say, okay, maybe I need to work on some tools to be better equipped just to handle these things on a day-to-day basis.
Preventative. Like,
Yeah.
I have my daughter, I encourage her. I'm like, "Have you gone to therapy? Have you talked to your therapist?" Not because there's an issue, but preventative. Like, just because this world is crazy and life is heavy, and you just never know what's coming around the bend. And am I equipped to handle this mentally? You don't know. Like, we don't know till we're in that position. And honestly, when I found myself in the middle of a crisis with my ex-husband, and with a diagnosis that was, kind of hit us blindsided, and a psychotic break, and we were just in the middle of this crisis. We losing our home, and all kind of things. And I mean, you just don't know how you're going to respond. And so that's why I think therapy is a tool that it is good to have in your back pocket for preventative, as well as coping, as well as whatever you want to call it. It's just a good thing.
Yeah. So what are some of the resources that are out there for individuals if they feel like, okay, maybe I need to listen to what Jen and Becky are saying, and maybe I do need to go and talk to somebody? Like, I think there's also a thought of like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy expensive. How am I ever going to afford to do something like that? And so I think it's one of those that people put off because
Right.
cost can certainly be a barrier. So what are some resources?
I do know that a lot of jobs, if you reach out to your HR department, a lot of times jobs offer those 3 free therapy sessions. I know with us, our school district offers that. And when I go into the schools and I talk to the teachers about mental wellness, they're like, "Wait, what? We have what?" And
Yeah.
I'm going, "Yeah, guys, you have 3 free therapy sessions." And while 3 doesn't seem like a lot, and it truly, in, looking at it, it's a start. It's a
Yes.
step in the right direction, because sometimes you're going to go to therapy and you're going to be like, well, that wasn't for me. I have a friend who went one time and she was like, nope, it's not for me. And I was like, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 times to see if you connect with somebody. Sometimes you have to go and you visit and you talk with, you go to 3 or 4 or 5 different therapists before you find one that there's a
I know it's
connection
like
with.
dating. Like that first one
It
that's like,
really
yeah. The first one is like, I'm just sizing you up to
is.
see if you're somebody that like I can build a human connection and trust with.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the truth. But you would be very surprised if you check. So I would always encourage people who work and have, an HR department or whatever, check with them, see if they offer anything.
I'll
And
add to that too, because if you have any kind of medical insurance, most likely you have some sort of mental health
yes,
benefit through that. Or
yes,
you might have, in addition to or separate standalone, even if you're not on a medical plan, an employee assistance program or an EAP.
yes,
Certainly, so many organizations are finding value in those. And from the HR side, even when I sat in the HR seat where we had an EAP available, if I had an employee who was going through a divorce, and so maybe their mood, their attitude, and it was just like, as an employer, you should never diagnose anybody. I
right,
mean, I certainly get
correct,
that too, where they're like, ah, I know he's going through a divorce and I think he's depressed and I think he's blah, 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 blah. Well, from the employer standpoint, I would say focus on the behaviors. What are the behaviors you're seeing that you're worried about? But then you can say, like, hey, you're going through some stuff, like, we have this resource available. Not, I think you're depressed, go do this, but yeah, just making
I
sure people know it's there. Because 'cause you're right, people
Yes,
don't often know that those benefits are
they
out
don't
there for
even.
them.
Well, I have somebody in my life, and this person was going through a struggle, a really bad struggle, and their employer came to them and said, "Here's the deal. We've noticed some changes in your behavior. We sense some agitation and some anger, and so what we're going to do is we're going to hook you up with our HR department, and you have to go see a therapist by within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And if not, then we're going to have repercussions. So I see that side, but then you also have the side of it where people are like, I can't go ask the HR department because if I do, then there's a stigma with this. And they're going to say, oh, and then word's going to get around the office or the company, or they're going to think I can't do my job
Oh, I
effectively
know, and I hate
because,
hearing that. I
yeah,
hate that because, like, I'm an HR practitioner, that's what I've been my whole career, and if you have an HR person that's talking about it, then that person shouldn't be in that job because that HR
correct.
person is there to help you be successful. I know people don't always embrace that, just like you're saying, they view it as like, "Oh, I can't go
Yeah.
tell them something," but I will speak for, like, all of the good HR practitioners out there that they want you to be successful, healthy employees because that leads to successful, healthy workplaces. It's
Right.
not, "Oh gosh, this person, this is a mark against them and, they get a bad grade for this." It really is like, all right, if you got something going on and it's impacting your behaviors at work, we want to get you connected to the right resources so that you can be doing better.
And, there's such a stigma with mental health, and a lot of people don't look at therapy like we do, just like, oh, well, I'm just going to chat about what I've been dealing with in life. A
Mhm.
lot of people look at it like, oh my gosh, there must be a major problem because I'm going. And so, there's, like I said, such a stigma with mental health, whether it's mental illness, mental wellness, mental whatever. There's
Mhm.
always such that fear of, are they going to judge me? What are they going to think? And so I run into that an awful lot. I run into that actually, a ginormous amount where they're like, is there any way that I can anonymously ask HR, because I don't want them thinking I can't do my job,
Yeah.
especially first responders and things like that.
Mm. Yeah.
So it is a tricky thing.
Well, what do you say to people when you're out in the community and you're talking about like, "Hey, mental health is important," and they're like, "Oh, I don't know about that." Like, what do you do to help alleviate some of those fears?
We just make sure people know that what is our one of our big phrases that we say, especially right now, is it's okay not to be okay. And that everybody has mental health, whether it's good or sometimes questionable. We all, like you said earlier, we all deal with stuff and it's a matter of how you respond. And so it's nothing to be ashamed of. And so what NAMI does, and personally what NAMI Piedmont Tri-County, which covers these three counties, is we educate. So I think that's a big thing. I know when I went through my personal thing, we were involved in a local organization that we actually moved here for. And that organization had four head people. And when my ex husband went through what he went through, quite honestly, nobody came to visit, nobody called. And I always say mental health is not a casserole dish illness. In other words, if my husband would have been in a horrific car accident, we would have had a food train set up, I'm
Mhm.
sure. If we'd have lost his job due to, whatever, or he had a cast on him, on his
Mhm.
leg or something, people would have been a GoFundMe or whatever. But he completely had a psychotic break, and you can't see that. You just see the effects of it. And everybody kind of just, it's like they scatter. It's like people are
Yeah.
like, I don't know what to say. And so I think when I talk to people and they say they're scared or they don't think they need that, I just let them know that it's okay. you know
Yeah.
and just something maybe to put in your back pocket for later. I might not need it now, but
Mhm.
maybe I'll come across somebody in life that needs it, maybe a neighbor or a friend or a family member.
I think you also bring up a good point with your idea of like the whole casserole dish illness. Like you're not getting on the meal train because somebody had some sort of mental health
Yes.
issue or crisis. And I think that's interesting because when I've talked to employers in the past, like around like the accommodation discussion, it's like treat it like anything else. Like what would you tell that person who came in with a broken arm if they couldn't do that job for a while? Like what would you allow for them to do? Is there a way you would change the job? Would you give them some leave? Like treat it the same way. Like you don't need to be the one who knows how to set the bone and put put the cast on, just the same way you don't need to be able to diagnose and treat the mental illness, but it's really like it is an illness, so treat it as you would with anything else, and just follow that same path and have that conversation.
Right, and when I do the mental health first aid trainings that I do, which are 8-hour-long trainings, and they're very deep, but very good, very thorough. When the people leave that, they are certified in mental health first aid. We actually have a whole segment set up with, a scenario where an employee, a coworker was hospitalized for something, and how would you respond as a community? How would you respond as as friends, and how would you respond as workplace? And then we have a scenario where somebody was in the mental hospital, and we ask the same questions, and and every time it causes for a whole, everybody stops. Then they're like, I don't know. And so again, I don't feel like it's judgment a lot of times, which it is sometimes, but I feel like it's ignorance. I think it's
Yeah.
just ignorance.
People don't know what to say or how to
Correct.
act. Yeah.
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit about that mental health emergency or mental health first aid training. That sounds like something that could be really important for organizations to have multiple people go to, or to have HR people attend, or first line
Yeah,
supervisors, like people who have a lot of exposure and are interacting. That sounds like something
correct.
that could be really beneficial.
It is. We have, so I think it was last year, we received a grant. NAMI Piedmont Tri-County received a grant specifically for our outreach coordinator for Lancaster, for York County, and myself. And I don't remember who else to go to this training. And it was intense. It was a pretty good class. I mean, it was a really good class, but it was very intense. And it was, I think it was, I can't remember how many hours we had to go through, and I became a mental health first aid instructor.
Wow.
And so what that is it's not a NAMI program. It is literally called mental health first aid, and it's a nationally recognized program. And normally it can cost anywhere from $50 a person, $150 a person. I've seen it go up to like $1,500 a person,
Wow.
depending on the instructor and the corporate, the
Yeah.
organization
The
that
when,
they
the where,
are.
the who, the whole thing.
Correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
with NAMI being a nonprofit, we are right now we are able to offer that free. So we go in and, for example, I know Lancaster County School District called us in, and all of their counselors, guidance counselors for the entire school district, got mental health first aid, and you can teach in person anywhere from like 10 to 30 people at one setting, no more than 30, because you want it to still be personal, and it's a heavy, it's a heavy topic. So but they go in, and they do a pre-assessment like a week or two before the class. We have a place for the class wherever the organization wants to have it, and we go in and we teach a class, and usually they provide lunch or something, and it's a full 8-hour day. And then
Yeah.
once they're done, everybody that participates, they get certified and they get a certificate.
I
So
would love to see this kind of program, regardless of cost, become more like we have with like CPR and AED, where it's just much
yes.
more common. Like when we started having fire drills and fire alarms, like fewer people die in fires because they've become trained for it, right? And so then, unfortunately, in this day and age now, we also have, like our active shooter drills and training, so that like we will hopefully it never happens to us, but be prepared, or at least be thinking. And we do the same thing, like we have CPR. So I feel like this is the next thing that like we just need to have. It just needs to be a norm for the training in our workplaces, that like if you're interacting with people, like let's get people the training so that they can help when these things happen.
Well, one thing that we stress in that class is that we are not therapists. So
Right.
we are not, and like
Yes.
we say that a lot.
Yep.
We are not diagnosing anybody. We
Yep.
are literally looking for signs and symptoms. And we have, again, tools in our back pocket for, if I see XYZ, this is what I can do. This is
Yep.
how I can make the situation better. This is how I can de escalate. This is where I can go. This is a resource I can have. So it is literally, like you just said, first aid, but it's for mental health. And it's very impactful. Actually, next week I do have a class with the fire department, Lancaster County. It has kind of caught on. York County's doing a wonderful job as well. So we're getting out there with
Yeah,
it.
I love that. I wanted to get out there. So I was recently at an event, and like a local law enforcement agency had this huge armored vehicle thing, and I mean, got it practically looked like a tank, but it was on wheels. Anyway, and I was chatting with the officer who brought it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, why do we even have this thing? Like this, how often do you use this? And he was like, oh, we bring this out all the time. And as we were chatting, and again, this is like a super brief conversation. So I put my judgy pants were on. Like, let me be clear about that. Like, I have very limited information in the short amount of time. But as the person who was telling me, like, oh yeah, we bring it out all the time because sometimes there's a person and you just don't know what they're going to do, and I don't want to get close to them. And part of me was thinking in the back of my mind, like, do we have mental health training? Like, again, I am not in law enforcement. I am not dissing the law enforcement people. Truly, I'm not. Like, that is a tough job. But part of me, like, just seeing this big thing and thinking about like one person, I'm thinking like, well, what? Maybe they're just in some sort of mental health crisis. Like, are they really? But again, I
Right.
don't have that training. I don't know. So I'm glad that everybody has the tools they need to keep them safe. But there was just that little piece in my judgy pants that was
Well,
like,
I will tell you to put your mind at ease. Lancaster County, and again, I cannot speak for anybody else. I can speak for us because I know firsthand. I can speak for NAMI Piedmont Tri County. So I do know Lancaster County and York County and Chester County all have the availability for their police and their sheriff's departments to go to a training that NAMI offers, and it's a 35-hour training, and it is called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. And we do it here in Lancaster County once a year, usually January, February, somewhere in there. And it is a week-long training where our sheriff and our chief of police, our police
I'm
chief,
loving everything you're saying.
they send them and they come and sit for 5 days. It is something that NAMI South Carolina offers, and we partner and team up with them. We have a very good instructor with NAMI South Carolina who puts that on for us. And my favorite day is at the very end, after they've sat through and heard all of our community partners. They've heard all kind of stories. They've met people. They've seen real faces. At the end of the week on Friday, they do scenarios where we have our local actors from our local playhouse comes in. They come in and they do scenarios, and the officers go in front and they have to respond as they've been trained all week. And it is a really, really, really good class. So put your mind at ease. We got that.
Okay,
We're
good.
working on
Whew,
it. We're working
because
on it.
I get so nervous. I think just in this day and age that it's
Yeah.
like, are we going after the right thing? So I am glad to hear that at least in this area, and I hope that it's expanding, and I hope it's the same across the
Same.
country, that,
Yeah.
we do have those first responders who are getting the skills that they need in their toolbox to be able to handle this. And
Yes,
I can
ma'am.
also see from that side of, like, let's say it's a firefighter, like, they're going to put out a fire. Like, they probably didn't sign up thinking like, I'm going to be having to deal with somebody who's in a mental health crisis.
Yeah, and you think about it, a firefighter is going to a fire and possibly somebody who just lost their home and their business. I mean, would that
Yeah.
not throw them into a mental, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
so I
If you
love
think
the
about
fact
your
that
feelings and
they're,
your mood and your ability
yes,
to relate, that's gonna throw you for a loop.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Okay, good. Well, you have definitely made me feel better for sure.
That's good.
I wanna go back now to, because you mentioned this early on, like, with the younger generations, part of it, the stigma is being removed, but at the same time, the statistics around depression and suicide for teens is alarming. I don't have the specific data, maybe you do, but I will say that when I've seen it, like, it's high and it's shocking and it's scary. And so talk to me about the younger generations and mental health. What can we do to be supportive?
I always get this question, and I enjoy it at the same time. I don't, because I don't want to sound like somebody who is anti social media, because I'm not. I mean, I have every platform that we have. I'm a notorious TikTok scroller. I'm on the recipe and cleaning side of TikTok, but I still do it nonetheless. My daughter
Yep.
loves that. Um, and so, I get on the Instagram and I get on Facebook and I get on all these things. But you think back to when, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to tell you, I'm 45. And so you think back on to when we were younger, and I 100% feel like I agree with people who say social media has had a lot to do with the mental wellness and mental well-being of our younger people. Because used to, if you were competing, you would go to your high school and you had your it click, and then you
Yep.
had this,
Yep.
you had that, and that's all you had.
It was
Now you've
contained.
got
Yeah.
correct. Now you have
The
these
whole
these
freaking
girls.
world.
these
Yeah.
girls are like comparing themselves to Kardashians and
Yeah.
comparing themselves to people they've never seen, they never are gonna meet, and it's just insanely
I hear it too from,
crazy.
like, some of the mom friends, like, you see, everybody's got, like, their perfect Mother's Day picture and everybody's clean and in their beautiful clothes and, like and yeah, I don't have children, but then, like, I'll have other people that are like, "Yeah, that was, like, 5 seconds," and I'm glad that, or people like, I love it when I see
Yeah,
people who put, like, the real plus, like, the edited because I agree social
100%.
media presents it's only the pieces that people are choosing to put out there that
Yes,
like, the good, glowy, happy rainbows and sunshine part, not, like,
yes,
I
and
spilled my coffee down my
unfortunately,
shirt and had to give a presentation and all that.
girl, listen, yes, I get and I'm with that 100%. One thing that I get a lot of too, going back to what you asked about younger generation and this and that and the other, I think it's social media, but I also think the fact that everything is in real time now. So,
Mhm.
for example, I remember when I was younger and Desert Storm happened, and I remember the next day seeing video footage of bombings and things blowing up. And I remember the news anchor saying, "This is crazy that we can see this. This is unreal that we're looking at this." And yeah, it's a few hours old and it's whatever, but man, this is actually happening. And now it's like something happens in Israel or across the country or across the world,
Mhm.
and there's a video up and it's real
Yep,
time. And so,
yep,
people are posting things. And I think that has a lot to do with kids, with our younger people and the social media and things. People aren't realizing that once something's put out there, you can't get it
yeah, it's
back.
there.
And
It's there
yeah,
forever.
you can't get it back and it's gone. And so I do know, you hear story after story of suicide attempt or suicide because something was leaked that a person did privately or whatever, an embarrassing thing or something,
Yeah,
and they just didn't see a way out. So they took their life. And honestly, it's just something that, as adults, as hopefully as people who are dealing with children, maybe in the school system or whatever, we don't keep our heads in the sand. We go on and say, "This is where we're at. This is real. Let's try to get some help and shed some light on this,"
yeah.
because suicide is 100% preventable, especially in our younger, 10 years old, 12 years old. That's
I know, it's so
there's no
crazy.
reason. And social anxiety, since COVID, we still see the repercussions of social anxiety.
Mhm.
We actually have a support group, a teen support group in Rock Hill and Lancaster County,
Yeah,
for 13 to 17-year-olds. And it just grows. It grows. And it's because people are struggling. Kids are finally coming to say, "I'm not okay." And one sad thing that I will say, if there are any parents that end up listening or whatever, one thing I get whenever we go into the schools and do something, I'll get a hand question, a raised hand, or I'll get somebody come up to my table and they'll say, "What do you do when your parents don't believe you? What do you
mm,
do when they say you're just looking for attention?"
wow.
And that's hard. It's hard, because unfortunately, some parents are either just really busy or they don't want to acknowledge or they don't want to believe that this could be happening, that your child could be struggling with something that you don't understand. And it might not be big to you, but it's big to them. And so, we just need to be careful. And I mean, honestly, I'd rather my child realize, "Hey, listen, you're struggling. We're going to go talk to somebody. And if they are trying to get attention, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to give them attention. If they are struggling and you don't give
Yeah,
them that, then
yeah,
you're suffering those consequences,
yes. The risk is very
It's way
real.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah. So I think that in general, there are certainly a lot of issues with mental health and people at all different times are going through different things. And so we just need to remember that especially with mental health, there are things that you don't always see what's going on. But
Right.
I'm so glad that you're providing trainings and that you can help connect people with resources so that we can prevent some of these things from becoming a bigger crisis and being worse than they need to be.
Yes, and one person at a time learning, and we are always gathering volunteers. We're always getting people who are interested and say, "Hey, can I help?" And people are starting to come out and say, "Okay, I struggle with this." Even in even in the celebrity world, you're having people. How many celebrities now that we know that are struggling with bipolar or struggle with depression or severe anxiety or whatever, and they're
Yep.
open about it now. They're like,
Yep.
"Yep, this is what I struggle with."
Yeah. Of course, it's finding that sweet spot of, like, what's the right amount to be open and sharing versus going too far, it's like then it comes back to, like, the whole social media piece of it of, like, well, how much of it? But yeah. But I am glad that that stigma around mental health is being removed and that people are being open about these things. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. It was a pleasure chatting with you and just learning about some of the different things that are out there. So I appreciate you so much and thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Thank you everybody for listening to the Gorilla HR podcast and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time.